let's move into another subject.
Sure.
And I'm going to try and build a scenario, right, for you. Okay, so by trade or by profession, you're a qualified accountant. Okay, you went to one of the best universities in the world for your masters, which was
Cambridge.
Cambridge.
Yeah.
Okay, all done before you're 30. So first, I want to say congratulations to you.
Oh, is that an achievement?
Yeah, I mean, you see, is that an achievement? That's how you know there's a difference. It's levels. So, if, for example, I'm going to give you a scenario, you're an artist, you signed a record deal, and you've probably got an advance of 50K. That will be paid incrementally over the course of 18 months. But up front, you've probably got 20 grand up front, okay? So you know for the next 18 months, there's going to be incremental payments that will tie you over, almost like a student loan. With that type of finance, although I'm not giving you the numbers of the incremental payments, what would you look as a good way to manage the resources with just that little amount that you've got?
I think the first starting point is to look at your outgoings. You need to understand what you need to spend that money on. What are the important things that need to be achieved? And from that, prioritize those costs. Then the most important thing I'll say is that you need to actually manage your cash flow. So receiving a 20 grand advance, that needs to last at least to the point that you get the next tranche of that advancement, or, you know, the remaining balance of that 50K, the next tranche of that. So it's not about just, you know, we call it timing of cash flows. So if you know there's a cost that you have to pay, I don't know, maybe studio time or PR, how can you make sure, sounds wrong, because obviously if you're the PR company, you want your money up front, but how can you delay that as long as possible to make sure that you can use that cash towards something else, or just preserve your cash for as long as possible, because that's what actually keeps you going and ties you over. So it's about managing that resource for as long as possible. And that, I think, is what you need to think of carefully and effectively. It's not just making impulse payments or purchases. It's actually thinking, do you actually need this? And ultimately, you have to look at it as a return on capital. So what I mean by return on capital is, if you do spend £10,000, let's say, of that 20,000 on, I don't know, PR, marketing, studio, whatever, you know, your band or whatever, how are you making sure you're making that money back with a markup? Because ultimately, you're a business as an artist. Yes, you make music, that is the product, but there's more to it. How do you actually make sure you recover that 10,000 outgoing, in terms of, is it going to generate your music sales? Is it going to lead to endorsements, sponsorships? Is it going to, you know, these subscriptions on YouTube, or, you know, the streaming of your music? You just need to make sure that you've punched a few numbers and done a few calculations and forecasting to make sure that that money is recoverable before you actually then go out and make that expenditure.
Someone will say, should I put a deposit on a house? Well, I mean, well, London, you can't really get anything for 20K, but I mean, it's...
Well, maybe you'll struggle,
like
maybe a garage.
Yeah, so what's your view on properties? You know, a lot of people want to see property as a good way to, you know, invest. Is property really an investment, or is it just security?
It depends what side of the fence you're sitting on. I think you also have to bear in mind culture in the UK. We have this culture of, you know, every man should own his own bricks.
Which is actually a British culture.
Yeah.
They don't think like that in Germany or France. So
That's
if
true.
you travel,
It's
you
very
would realise
different.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a British culture. So you have to understand the culture of the place that you live. Property can be an investment because it has the ability to regenerate returns over time. Mm-hmm. So by that, I mean the house price can go up in value. And as long as your mortgage is covered then it represents a good, it can represent a good investment. And also you have to look at it, if it's maybe like a buy to let as well that you're doing, that brings in cash flow over time. So again, you can see it as an investment. At the same time, you've also got the other side, which is the mortgage, and that's a liability. So are you going to be able to meet those payments? Are you going to be able to cover the cost? And I think you also have to factor in the additional costs that come with owning a property. So maintenance is number one, the normal wear and tear over time. How much is that going to cost? Two, your council tax, that's a major factor, which depends on the property price as well, on your location. Three, your bills. Bills are going up all the time. I think we just had announcements that most of the major utility suppliers, energy suppliers, are putting up the prices quite significantly.
Again.
So council tax has just gone up by an average 4% as well. So it's about knowing whether you can manage these costs with time, and it's again making sure you've got the money, whether that is from a job, or if you're a musician, for example, your regular sources of income, whether your gigs or your publishing deal or your merchandise sales, making sure that you have enough money to meet those costs. So what I'll say is, in terms of coming back to your question, what do I think of property? I think there's a couple of things you have to bear in mind. Brexit is going to play a factor. It's not completely sure what factor that's going to have. But what I'll say in terms of that, what you have to consider is, number one, there's a housing shortage in the UK. So that's why you see house prices kind of maintaining their level and they continue to rise. And that's what is that demand is keeping them significantly buoyant. But on the flip side, if Brexit now starts to affect financial institutions, are they going to keep lending in terms of mortgages? What's that going to look like? Because if that then affects lending, people are not going to be able to obtain mortgages to buy property, which you then see house prices start to correct a little bit and go down. I think that is less of an issue in a place like London, because London is such a great hub for professionals, for families. It has a pull about it. So I think the demand is always going to be there to sufficiently mitigate any uncertainty that comes with Brexit and other issues. We've definitely, and I'm just meaning, the standard segment of the market in terms of, the low cost and the less than 1 million. Above, the luxury homes, we've seen some effect of Brexit already. They've been, because that is dominated by a lot of international buyers, and they're already starting to pull out the market. So we've seen a lot of house prices at the luxury end fall. We've seen commercial property affected as well. So I think it's having all those things in mind if you're considering making a property purchase as an investment.